Welcome to Colorado Tech People, where we talk with the leaders shaping how technology improves the way we work and live. Most companies think they're customer centric, but they're often making decisions based on feedback from only 5 to 10% of their customers. In this episode, I'm joined by Jason Ballier, VP of Product at Medallia, to explore how companies can go beyond surveys and use AI, behavior, and experience data to truly understand their customers. We'll talk about the future of customer experience, the hard decisions behind building enterprise products, and what it really takes to turn insight into action. Jason, welcome. What drew you to Medallia, and what product challenges excited you most when you stepped into your role?
Well, in actuality, I was acquired. So I didn't choose Medallia. Medallia chose us, I guess you could say. At the time, customer experience really was mostly about VOC, voice of the customer. So really focused on surveys. So the exciting part for us through the acquisition was that we were a journey management orchestration platform. And it seemed like journey management, journey orchestration was a great evolution and differentiator for that space because that space was still stuck into the small amounts of feedback they were getting and not in the holistic view of what we now know as customer experience, right? Which is more than just the feedback piece. So once we were acquired, became aware of that potential that was really untapped, right? Specifically in areas like automation within the CX landscape. Like there was a lot of manual action being taken, but no levels or very small levels of automation. So there was a huge white space in being able to take the ideas of orchestration, journey orchestration, personalization, and start to play with it in terms of what does it mean in a holistic customer experience program, right? And not too long after that, along came our friend ChatGPT, which everyone was just kind of playing with. If you remember the beginnings of write me a poem in the voice of these different people, which have now really reshaped the idea of CX in general with all the agency that's come along, game changing evolutions to these types of legacy solutions that are there.
And what was the name of the company that was acquired that you were
It
working
was
for?
called Thunderhead. It was based out of the UK, and it was one of the premier platforms that first introduced the idea of journey orchestrations and the value of the customer journey. So they were very much a pioneer in that space.
And you were Chief Solution Officer at Visual Cube. What lessons do you have from that company, and how does it shape how you think about product leadership today?
Well, first, as you said, we started that company, few of us that had known each other for a while, and as everyone knows from starting a business, it's hard, right? It's really hard, but it's worth it, right? It's very much worth it. As we all know, what 20% fail in the first year and 90 over the first 5 years or something like that. It was very difficult, but very informing. And the way that it's informed my leadership, specifically around product, is you really have to be clear about the vision and what you want to become and ruthlessly stick to that. We wanted to be a product company when we started, and we had a huge influx of requests to do services because of all of our background. And we thought, hey, wouldn't it be great if we can fund this organically using services versus staying strictly with the product side? And what we ended up being was a services organization long term and not really the product piece of it. So that ruthless prioritization, that ruthless focus really came to bear for me when it comes to other leadership that's there. And that really disrupted our vision. So we were successful and ran that company for 12 years. But if you really look at the intent of what we wanted to start, we never really got to it because we let that vision become clouded with other things. So that was one. The other, sort of the old adage of surround yourself with great people. I mean, we had the ability to surround ourselves with some really good talent. We didn't hire all of it. Some of it was consulted, and we had networks of people that we had. We built some great presence remotely in India for a while and actually started to dive into new, at the time, Amazon technologies for virtualizing services and other things. And we started to sort of look at how that could play a role in future product leadership that was there. And I think the biggest thing was And I think, Steve Jobs did it the best, which was the idea that we would anticipate customer need, not just ask for it. So in product leadership today, there's a lot of organizations that heavily weigh on what customers are asking them to do and getting customer insight as to what their next thing is. And I think the customer feedback is important. But sometimes as product people, we have to look beyond that, anticipate what the next things are and move that. And so in product leadership, it sort of informed the way we were looking at that as an organization at Visual Q, which was what's the next thing we should do. So a lot of that informed kind of how we looked at it going forwards.
Yeah, some really good lessons there. What product decision has had the biggest impact on Medallia's success?
Well, I think like everyone today, the advent and integration of AI is really what is leading to the biggest impact. Medallia really has taken a different lens or a different way of positioning the use of AI. They've trademarked an idea called frontline ready AI. We're there to make the users or frontline users more productive, more automated, not replace them.
Is there a rapid evolution in CX? Have you seen a lot of changes in how people are thinking of CX?
Very much so. It's no longer just a thought that it's about the feedback and survey programs. It started to envelop all of the interactions customers could do and trying to figure out how to promote or provide customers with the most optimal experience, regardless of how they're doing it. That's no longer siloed. We think that's coming together in a CX piece. There are still technologies like your marketing technology or service technology, which remain separate, but they now all work together in more of a CX ecosystem or mindset where you have to understand all of those things, including the feedback, to know how you can improve those experiences for those customers and ensure that you have relevant experiences going forward.
And shifting gears a bit, how do you prioritize features when different stakeholders, executives, analysts, and frontline employees all have competing needs?
First, you have to have alignment. The needs of what those different stakeholders are asking for have to be aligned completely with the business outcomes that you're trying to drive. Obviously, people will have needs of doing something that don't quite align, or they're not the prioritized list of what we're trying to achieve as a business. So I think first and foremost, you have to look at how do those requests or competing needs align with what we're trying to achieve as a product. Next, you have to look at the standard factors that we all look at. Can I monetize this? How much is this going to grow adoption? Does this increase stickiness within the base that I have, or allow me to expand the base in a way that is going to help the business grow in those directions? I think those, then, if you start to compare those, you're going to start to see some differentiation in those needs and where they fall out. And then, obviously, as you get towards the remainder, we apply some bits of scoring rigor. So we use Bryce so that we look at the business impact, the reach, as well as everything else. But any sort of scoring algorithm that gives you that you're comfortable with to see how those similar features that have passed those first few gates align to where the investment is going to drive the greatest impact.
How does Medallia turn massive volumes of customer feedback into insights that companies can act on?
Yeah, well, first, like we said before, it's more than just about feedback in today's world. That's a small portion. If you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with feedback response rates, but they're somewhere in the low single digit percentages, like 5%. Even the best companies get like 10%. So really that's expanded beyond feedback. And now to your point about the massive data set, is it's increasing that data set first and foremost to be more comprehensive and reflective of what customers are telling us. So what are they doing in their digital sessions? What kind of conversational data do we have attached to those clients? The speech, the chats, the things of that nature, and the in-store interactions and all the different types of interactions they have. I think the key to that, to turning volumes of that into insights that can be acted on, is really looking at a few things. One is understanding that user's role and the scope of data that they have access to. So in other words, even though we have a massive set, if I am someone who is in operations that's dealing with a certain location, a store, things like that, the actual scope of data that I am is insightful to me is what's happening in my store, for one. But two, I can then use the insights of my store to baseline and compare against others to see how I might balance it that's there. So I think the key to that is understanding the role of the people who are using it, that can convert those insights into action, or that you can take action on, versus assuming that we have to analyze the entire data set from end to end. And that's how you drive away from that massive raw data into relevant insights that are really meaningful to the people who are sitting in front of it, or to the processes that sit on top of it, because it's not always about taking everything from all aspects of the data set. It's more of a focused, domain-based expertise that you take to then drive insights forward.
And can you give us some examples? Like, it's a larger data set than just customer feedback. So, what are the other customer insights or customer data points that are being collected?
If you're in digital sessions, for example, like what parts of my website have you gone to, right? Have you interact with most? Does that interaction tell me areas of interest that you have within my product or brand, certain categories of products if it's more a product-based company, certain types of blogs or articles or things that might be there. I can also look at your digital scoring or engagement that's there. Are you highly engaged by the content you're reading? Are you finding frustration that you can't do or get to the things you're exhibiting? Are you exiting quickly? That's there? Are you doing some comparison shopping by copying and pasting and do other things? So all of that digital side comes into play. And then when you get to the conversational side, speeches and chats, you think of, what am I learning from the conversation that was there? Am I using text analytics or natural language processing to actually distill down those conversations into a set of emotions? What were you feeling at the time? How are you referencing different products, services that we have as a positive, negative feeling about those things? I can interpret all of that and use all of that data without any feedback to it to actually understand, are there trends in my business that I need to handle at my store level or something of that nature? If you're going back to the role-based view of the customers that are there. And so if once you bring all that together, you get a more holistic view of what customers are telling you. You get more relevant and insightful views as to how you might need to apply action to solve different types of customer problems.
Well, very good. Thank you. What role is AI playing in experience management today? And where is it creating the most real value versus hype?
The reality is that it's creating value everywhere. If you think of CX, again, just as we talked about, this holistic view of everywhere customers are interacting and getting insights on it. So if you go back to those digital channels, customers are using chat types of interfaces, chat GPT, Claude, whatever it might be, versus standardized web browsing. They're doing all of their investigation that they have recently done online in your website, are looking around, searching, and they're actually going right to those tools to figure out where they should spend their time and effort that's there. So that's actually changing the way customers interact digitally, because they're starting in a non-first party location. They're not starting on my website, they're starting somewhere else. They're getting more in-depth understanding from those engines than they did from standard search, and they're starting to do more and more there. So AI is already impacting the way we look at digital experience. And then once they do get to me, digital agents are alive and well already on digital sites, assisting with shopping, help people resolve issues. A lot of those applications tend to say that a lot of the agentic bots can actually um, solve 80% of some of your service problems, and only 20% need to go to a human in the loop. Those are already in play in a lot of organizations, and therefore they become part of influencing CX and how CX responds to that, right? In the contact center, you've got voice agents which are activated, and models, as we talked about, that are able to extract and summarize conversations. So where you may have had very specialized tech in the past, AI can now look at the transcript of a conversation and summarize it for you. Where you may have had to break it apart and done other things in the background, CX organizations or software is now starting to implement model-based approaches to understanding thematic things about the conversations that are happening and everything else. And then inside of our tools, you're really getting to, chat GPT style interface. So conversational interfaces for getting insights. You're no longer looking at dashboards. You're starting to ask questions about the data like you would in those style interfaces. You're able to summarize those interactions and feedback like we talked about versus having to read through them and groups of them that are there. You can perform things like root cause analysis on those as to what's leading to this negative feedback and do those things if you're looking at it from a feedback lens. Agentic workflows are coming more and more relevant where you can turn those insights immediately into some form of action without a lot of prescriptive rules and things of that nature. And then lastly, in our partner networks, you're partnering with companies like Adobe and Salesforce and other things. They already have agentic technologies, right, that are there. So what's coming to the surface is less of the can I integrate with that through API, traditional API integration. It's agent to agent, so A2A integration, MCP, how can I expose my data or perform tasks? If you think of agent-based technologies across the partner ecosystems, in CX, because of the breadth of it, I feel like it's got a lot that are starting to see real value, and we're, kind of staying away from just the general hype airs. And these are very domain specific sort of features that AI is helping people solve.
And how do you balance automation with the human touch when designing tools meant to improve the customer experience?
I think first and foremost, coming from the spaces I came from, like journey orchestration, always the key was in any form of automation or orchestration is to try to replicate that human interaction as much as possible. Again, you can't be completely humanized, or, well, we're getting closer to it, I guess, if you think of it from now using agent-based technologies, right, that are there. But really what it starts with is the profiling of a customer, understanding that customer from everything from what you know historically to more real-time recent interactions. The CEO of Thunderhead used to draw this analogy of having coffee with friends. When you go have coffee with friends, you meet them, have a conversation, you are empathetic during the time that you're there, or you're providing guidance or whatever it might be. But the next time you come back, you're not starting over again. You're not saying, well, hi, how are you? What would you like to talk about? It's like you're picking up where you left off. And it's that engagement that actioning or the automation builds on. If you understand the person or the group of people and their entire history of the organization, you can make that automation closer to a human-like touch in a sense that you can personalize it in a way that makes sense to relevant to those individuals that's there. The other side to automation is understanding intent. It's no longer automation for automation's sake. I'm just not doing things because someone told me to do it. I'm trying to figure out what is this person or group of people trying to solve. And in that, I'm trying to automate in a way that's, again, highly relevant to those. So in today's world, like we said, agentic technologies, other things can handle like 80% of the simple and repetitive tasks and leaving the 20% for the human touch sort of pieces that are there. So now the human touch, the things that really require deep interaction with a customer, longer in-depth understanding of a conversational piece and other things that aren't quite repetitive now get sort of that human touch. But I think the automation piece is really about bringing more of a customer understanding into it and intent-based to really still do some level of personalized and one-to-one automation for those versus just leaving it as a cold digital thing. You can actually apply some humanity and empathy to it.
And what are the biggest mistakes organizations make when trying to become customer centric?
Well, I think first, everyone starts with, the idea that you need to create a central version or source of truth. One database that has all the knowledge. You think of it from data warehousing, CDPs. The challenge there is that you always have a new source of data. So taking that approach that it has to get into that location first to become part of your customer-centric model, I think is a flaw. CDPs did it, like I said, data warehouses. You have to actually be able to include data virtually in some ways. So I think the first flaw is that people think like all the data lives in one place versus I have to be able to elegantly collect it or grab it virtually if I don't have it in that one place that's there. And what that leads to sometimes is biased selection of the data. So people will make decisions about what data to include, not include, then that doesn't give them the complete picture. So you're going to bias your understanding of what a customer is simply by choosing data that you think is relevant or not relevant versus choosing it and deciding whether it's relevant and you contend with it going forward. I think also when customers think of centricity, customer centricity, they think reactively in like service modes. Customer has a problem. I want to react to that customer problem and understand the customer that's there. If you truly want to be customer centric, you have to start thinking about proactivity. If I understand what customers are trying to do and what they're about, so their profile, I can preemptively decide how to fix problems before they happen because I know the flaws and impediments in their journeys and other things based on past reports. I can preemptive about those things versus being reactive. So being customer centric is about more being proactive and preemptive than it is reactive. I also think people leave out the influencing events, things like flight delays, weather. They seem like, why would you include them in customer centricity? Because they're not. But if I'm a hospitality organization and there's going to be bad weather and I want to be preemptive, I've got to understand that the customers I'm dealing with want to do outside activities and they won't be able to, so I can offer them something more. I have to think more than just the attributes I know about an individual. And then lastly, really to be customer centric, stop measuring individual metrics and look at the full experience because an individual metrics might give you a snapshot of one thing in one area. But if you look at really managing the full experience, you're going to become more customer centric in that way. And you'll get out of the pitfalls of just saying, oh, well, this metric is really good, so I must be doing great with my customers. When your customer's view of it might be, yeah, that one thing's great, but these other nine things are not, right? Because I'm not taking into account the whole thing.
Yeah, the journey orchestration is
Yeah,
really
exactly.
important.
Yep.
Yeah. And what has been the most surprising insight you've learned from customer experience data at scale?
I think the first one to me was, well, I think we talked about it before, was the very small percentage of people willing to give feedback. I mean, I knew it was never 100%, but I was very surprised becoming onto this side of it that percentages were so low in that 5 to 10% layer, even if you're good at it, it's there. I also noticed the surprise is that behavior, and I guess this wasn't as much as a surprise to me as it may have been to colleagues who weren't used to it, that behavior and engagement tell you more about how people are feeling than just what they are saying. Like they could actually give you feedback that you did pretty well and everything else, but their behavior after that or before, ongoing tells you how they feel about the brand. Are they as highly engaged? Are they going through long periods of disengagement, things of that nature, right? So it's what sometimes you refer to it as the silent majority, people who aren't giving you feedback, but they're telling you through their body language, through their engagement with the brand, how they really feel, right? That's there. And then things like likelihood to recommend is actually useless, in my opinion. Telling me you're likely to recommend is great. You gave me a 10. Did you recommend anybody? Have you ever? Have you brought family members in? Those things are what mean more. The fact that you told me you are likely to do it used to be seen as one of these things like, oh, we're doing really well because they're likely to recommend me. But did they ever? Do people ever recommend you? So those kind of spot scores, again, this goes back to measuring the entire experience and how people are feeling with behavior and everything else. They're not as influential. NPS is not one of the major metrics anymore. Are they talking about you on social? Is there positive sentiment coming out of it? It's sort of a a self-fulfilling score. It's like, well, my customers say I'm doing well, so I must be doing well. But it's not the end all be all. There is more out there than just those traditional CX insights that are well known.
So, looking ahead, how do you see experience management evolving over the next decade, and what role will AI play in shaping it?
Well, I think it's not going to be about a single solution, and it will be heavily in the future agentic driven, in my opinion. Like you will see sort of a network of agents sort of interacting in different across different vendors and ecosystems across the client ecosystems that sort of round out all of customer experience. It won't be about a single solution that's there. And as we've been talking about, experience management historically has been a reactive environment. Customers gave me negative feedback, or I've seen this kind of trend in conversations. Let me go try to address it after the fact. And there's some reactivity that will always be in things you can't see going forward. But it's going to move extremely more towards proactivity and preemptive sort of behaviors where it will constantly be looking for the conflicts in different experiences before customers ever give you feedback and try to preemptively resolve those things long term or proactively change your experience going forward to sort of guarantee you more of a positive experience than a negative one. So I think it's really going to move towards that direction. And AI is the huge contributor to that because there's been this real understanding or goal since the 90s to be really have one-to-one personalization, if you've heard people use that. I think with AI technology, that's begun to become more of a realization. The fact that AI can look at digital twins, other things that could represent those individuals or mimic what they're doing, understanding them, deal with large, vast amount of data, will get us to a place where we can truly have more personalized one-to-one experiences in experience management or in CX. And the use of synthetic data will actually be huge because today you look at trying to understand customer behavior and you only know up to the point where you've gathered the last interaction. Well, what if I wanted to experiment on changes going forward? If I can use synthetic data from AI to actually generate, mock interactions based on past customer behavior and the reality of how customers interact with my brand, now I can predict where to make my investments. I can put my money in the right place because the impact of those changes will be a lot higher if I can predict where to spend my money using synthetic data. So I think it's going to have a huge impact on it.
Yeah, for sure. As a product leader, how do you build teams that stay close to customers while operating inside a large, complex organization? How do you stay close to the customer?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you the point of your question, meeting customers is a must. It's for us, it's one thing that we look at very heavily within our product teams is to see how often they're meeting with customers and stakeholders and things of that nature to really get a perspective. And it's difficult as a product team because there's so much to do on a daily basis to get things done. I think the one thing that's if you lean into it, AI again is changing the PM workload landscape, right? Today, you could, with the right tools in place, generate new brainstorming and ideation. You could generate PRDs. You can build prototypes and other things, all in areas which may have taken a PM out of the mix from meeting with customers. And product managers can now meet more directly with customers while using these tools to do some of the workload things that they would normally do. So really it's about instilling in sort of, objectives and key results for every quarter is how often are we meeting with customers? Have we done enough customer meetings to understand? Have we created, our own advisory board and leveraging that critical feedback? Because you might not be able to meet with every customer, but if you have great users of your product that are highly open to ideation and new things and they're willing to give you feedback on it. Having advisory boards at different levels, you can have them at product, you can have at the feature level advisory boards, I think are critical to gaining customer feedback that's there and meeting with those customers. Maybe not always one-on-one, but at least getting and soliciting that insight from them as they go forward.
Final question. What is one book every builder should read and why?
Oh, there's probably so many, right? For crossing the chasm to all these roads. I would say this. I really enjoyed a book called Talk Like TED. If you haven't read it, it's about the sort of idea behind TED Talks, right? And the thing I think you get out of it, especially as product leaders who have to tell sometimes very elaborate stories or mix storytelling in, is it tells you two things, right? How do they get complex messages across in those TED Talks? You'll notice that They don't use any slides with words. They use visuals. They have a good talk track. There's a cadence to how they talk at a speed that's there. It helps the storytelling aspects of it. And two, the biggest learning for me out of that was there's a reason why TED Talks are 18 minutes or less, is because that's the level at which humans can consume new information, right? So when I think about that from a product perspective, it's like, how can I tell really concise stories, use great storytelling with great visuals, and how do I keep it to a level that is in that time frame that customers, prospects can actually consume that information, understand the value and relevance. So that's why I like that book. It's not directly about technology, but its application to how to storytell in our business, I think, is invaluable.
Cool, great advice. Thank you. And thanks so much for joining us today, Jason. Thanks for listening to this episode of Colorado Tech People. If Jason's insights on customer experience, AI, and product leadership sparked new ideas, consider sharing this episode with a colleague or a leader in your network. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with the innovators shaping Colorado's tech ecosystem. You can find show notes and links to Medallia in the episode description. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep building better experiences. Thank you again, Jason. Thanks for joining
Thanks.
us.
Thanks. Bye. Bye, everybody.